morning, everyone. My name is Nbhs1703 Murugasu from Group 3, and we are Bachelors of Medical and Health Science student at OUM. Today, we will be presenting our research proposal for Research Methodology and Scientific Communication course. The title of our research is The Impact of the High Salt Intake on Blood Pressure and its Role in Cardiovascular Disease Among Hypertensive Patients at Klinik Kesihatan Membakut. Our group member are me, Ganisan Analaki Murugasu, Muhammad Firdaus Mahali, Dulisha Jempai Anak Janik. For the introduction, let me start with the overview. Salt intake is directly linked to hypertension, a major risk factor of cardiovascular disease. Hypertension is a silent killer and contributes to severe health complications like heart disease, stroke, kidney failure. Understanding the impact of the salt intake on blood pressure is crucial to prevent chronic health conditions. As we already go through the definition, let's straight away jump into research focus. Our first research focus is examining how high salt intake influence blood pressure and increase the risk of cardiovascular disease. Secondly, investigate how reducing salt intake can lower blood pressure and decrease the cardiovascular disease risk. Globally, prevalence of the hypertension is rising, making this research relevant for public health intervention. Let's continue with background of the research. Sodium and blood pressure. So, according to He et al. 2019, sodium plays a critical role in regulating fluid balance and blood volume. Acid intake leads to water retention, raising the blood pressure and increasing the risk of hypertension and cardiovascular disease. Global hypertension statistics. According to WHO 2021, 1.13 billion people worldwide suffer from hypertension and contribute to high mortality for cardiovascular disease. In global salt consumption average 9 to 12 grams per day, above the WHO recommendation limit of 5 grams per day. The salt sensitivity. According to Cook et al. 2020, individuals with salt sensitivity like older adults or those who are pre-existing hypertension are more affected by sodium intake. Reducing sodium intake has been shown a lower blood pressure, especially in high-risk groups. Cardiovascular disease is a leading cause of death. According to WHO 2021, cardiovascular are responsible for about 31% of global death, with hypertension being a primary contributor to this risk. Prevent study and success. According to He et al. 2019, studies show even small reduction in salt intake can significantly lower blood pressure and reduce cardiovascular disease. The Puspak et al. 2020 explained countries like Finland have successfully implemented salt reduction program, leading to decrease the hypertension rate and cardiovascular mortality. While Khan et al. 2021 show much of the known about sodium reduction in hypertensive individuals, this is lead research on the long-term effect of reduction in the general population or across liver culture. Our problem statement, there is a strong evidence link high salt intake to elevate blood pressure, which is a major risk factor of cardiovascular disease. However, despite this well-established connection, there is a limited research on the effectiveness of large-scale public health intervention aimed at reducing sodium consumption, particularly within specific population. At Klinik Kesihatan Membakut, a primary healthcare facility located in the rural area of Sabah, Malaysia, hypertension is a common diagnosis among patients. KK Membakut serves a unique population with distinct dietary habits shaped by the culture preference, socio-economic factor, and accessibility to fresh food. The community relies on preserved food such as salt, fish, and soy sauce, which are affordable, convenient, and cultural significant, but are high in salt content. Additionally, the study even evaluated the effectiveness of various public health strategies such as campaign, guideline, and policy in reducing hypertension and cardiovascular disease. Our objective of the research. Our primary objectives are to assess the relationship between high salt intake and blood pressure levels among hypertension patients in KK Membakut. Our secondary objective are to evaluate the evidence of salt intake recommendation among hypertension patients. Secondly, to determine the association between salt intake level and the risk of cardiovascular disease in the population. Thirdly, identify the demography and lifestyle factor influencing salt consumption and blood pressure. Our research question. First, what is the average salt intake among hypertension patients at KK Memakut? Second, how does high salt intake correlate with blood pressure reading in these patients? Third, what is the level awareness regarding salt intake guideline among patients? Fourth, what demography factor like age, gender, lifestyle are associated with salt intake and blood pressure level? Okay, for the next try of hypothesis is continued by our friend Fidaus. Thank you.
I will go for the hypothesis. So we have a primary hypothesis. Before that, let's recap what hypothesis is. Hypothesis is a specific statements or assumptions made to be tested in the research. So it acts as a foundation for the investigations by proposing the relationships or effects that can be measured or analyzed. So we go for the hypothesis, for the primary hypothesis, null hypothesis. So there is no significant correlations between high salt intake and blood pressure levels among hypertensive patients at Klinik Kesehatan Memakut. This implies that variations in salt consumptions do not affect blood pressure readings in these populations, while the alternative hypothesis, which one is this? There is a significant positive correlations between high salt intake and blood pressure levels among hypertensive patients at Klinik Kesehatan Memakut. So this suggests that higher salt consumptions is associated with elevated blood pressure readings. So the secondary hypothesis, the hypothesis 2A, talk about awareness of salt recommendations. So the null hypothesis is there is no significant difference in the levels of awareness regarding recommended salt intake among hypertensive patients with varying levels of salt consumptions. So while the alternative hypothesis is H1, there is a significant difference in the levels of awareness regarding recommended salt intake among hypertensive patients with varying levels of salt consumptions. For the hypothesis 2B about the cardiovascular disease risk factors, null hypothesis, there is no significant associations between high salt intake and cardiovascular disease risk factors. Examples: BMI, cholesterol levels among hypertensive patients and while the alternative hypothesis H1, there is a significant association between high salt intake and CVD disease risk factors. Example: BMI, cholesterol levels among hypertensive patients and Memakut. So we go for the literature review. So we're gonna look the link between sodium intake and hypertension. So we have a direct relationship, which is the excessive sodium intake will contribute to elevations of or the elevated blood pressure or hypertension, which increases the risk of cardiovascular diseases such as heart disease, stroke, and like kidney disease. He et al. 2019. So we look at the mechanisms. So the sodium will increase the extracellular fluid volumes, and this can lead to higher blood pressure through the water retention. Alderman et al. 2019. So the key findings here: by reducing sodium by 1 gram per day can lower systolic blood pressure by 2.4 mmHg and diastolic by 1.2 mmHg. Zhang et al. 2020. For the individuals with salt sensitivity, like the elderly or those with hypertension, experience more significant changes in blood pressure from sodium intake. Sex et al. 2021. So, we're gonna look the existing public health strategies to reduce salt consumptions. We look at the educational initiatives. Finland's the country which is they have a campaign. They named the campaign Salt and Health. It successfully reduced the salt intakes and the cardiovascular mortality. Oscar et al. 2020. While the US from the CDC's Million Heart Initiative promotes sodium reductions, but challenges persist, especially in low-income areas. CDC 2020. So, and we look at the food reformulations, which is voluntary reductions by food manufacturers have limited impact, with a taste preference and consumer demand often stalling a progress. Liechtenstein et al. 2021. By the stringent regulations in countries like Chile and Mexico, they have a very strict rules, or with mandatory food labeling, they have been more successful in influencing consumer choices, Sanchez et al. 2019. So, we look at the policy interventions. The stronger regulations and cross-sector collaborations are essential for large-scale salt reduction. Graham et al. 2020. For the previous research on sodium reduction interventions, we look at the systemic review. The sodium reduction interventions, including dietary advice and public educations, were effective but needed to multifaceted to drive large-scale changes. Lee et al. 2019. In the New York City examples, health campaigns and collaborations with food retailers led to modest reductions in sodium intake, but more is needed to meet WHO guidelines. Et al. 2020. From cultural variations, the interventions in different populations show varying success, such as in South Korea, the educational programs alone were not enough. The policy support was necessary. They et al. 2020. So we look at the gaps in existing research. For the long-term outcomes, there is a limited research on the long-term effects of sodium reductions programs on hypertension and CVD incidents. Et al. So the LMIC challenges sodium reduction strategies in low and middle income countries are underexplored, where economic constraints are reliance on high sodium processed foods complicate efforts. Meant et al. 2020. And the interaction with other health factors, the combined impact of sodium reductions and other lifestyle changes like physical activity or diet quality remains insufficiently researched. Jones et al. So we go for the research methodology or research designs. So the type we choose a descriptive cross-sectional study. So these designs we're going to choose because the design will allow us to assess the relationship between high salt intake and blood pressure levels at a specific point in time among intensive patients. It is particularly useful by identifying correlations and patterns without establishing causality. So the approach is quantitative research designed to explore the relationship between salt intake, blood pressure, and cardiovascular risk. Why quantitative? Because from quantitative research, we enable to measure the variables like sodium intake, the blood pressure, and allows for the statistical analysis to understand the relationships, grassroots and population. So the goal is to assess how changes in the sodium consumptions impact blood pressure, ensuring generalizability across populations. So the study setting is we pick the location is at Klinik Kesehatan Membangkut. So the populations is around 50,000 populations. So the health challenges displays this area is we have very bangsa atau tribe that still use high salt intake in their food, like ikan masi, or so the population and the samples. Our target population is 700 patients aged 18 and above who attend NKK Memakut for regular checkups or treatment. So we aim at least minimum 100 participants to ensure statistical power. So the sampling technique is we use a stratified random sampling, which is stratify the sample by demographics such as age, gender, and severity of hypertension to ensure representation across different groups. So the data collections, we have questionnaire development. We have 3 sections, which is demographic information. So we collect the data on age, gender, education level, occupation, income, and duration of retention. While the dietary habits, we use a validated food frequency questionnaire (FFQ) to assess daily salt intake, including specific food typically consumed at high salt intake, such as processed food, snacks, or restaurant meals. So, and also the frequency of consumptions and portion sizes. So the awareness assessments include the questions to evaluate knowledge of recommended salt intake levels. In example, WHO guidelines, everyone should consume less than 5 grams per day and perceive health risks associated with high salt.
So I will continue our research proposal presentations. So I will continue the data collection just now. So the number 2 is we will measure the blood pressure, where it's a standardized procedure lah. Use an automatic or calibrated. We do use the sphygmomanometer to measure the blood pressure. Okay, so then the procedure is to ensure the participant rest for at least 5 minutes in quiet environments before we do readings the measurement of the blood pressure. Measure the blood pressure is seated positions with the cuff placed correctly on the upper arm. Okay, so then also we take at least 2 measurements at 1 to 2 minute interval and record the average value to minimize the variability. Okay, so next, the data analysis. So the data analysis, we do the descriptive statistics, which is we will see the mean, median, and standard deviation to summarize the demographics, salt intake, and the blood volume level, blood pressure level, right? So after that, we do the correlation analysis. Is mean person's correlation to examines the relationship. Pearson's correlation to examines the relation between medium intake and blood pressure is Folco to 018. And then also the multiple regression is account for confinders, okay, which is from age, gender, physical activity, and examine salt intakes independence effects on the blood pressure. Okay, so the statistical software, we will use the software as SPSS or the R for the data analysis. For the ethical consideration, we will be informed, which we use the concerns. So the participant will be informed about the study objective, procedure, and risk. Written consent will be obtained before the data collection. So the confidentiality participant data will remain confidential with the right to withdraw at any time. Okay. And then also we do the careful monitoring. It's like blood pressure measurement will be conducted carefully with referral to healthcare provider if needed. Okay. So the limitation, first one is the self-reported data and also the cross-sectional designs. So the self-reported data recall bias may affect the accuracy of the dietary intakes reported through questionnaire and also the food diaries. Okay, and then also the cross-sectional design, the causal relationship cannot be established. A longitudinal design would provide stronger evidence. That was said by the Lloyd Jones 2020. So our expectation of these significant contributions, the contribution to the new knowledge is like understanding high sodium impact on the blood pressure. Okay, then long-term sodium reduction effects, barrier to the sodium reduction. For the understanding high sodium impact on blood pressure, this study aims to enhance our understanding of how different level of sodium intakes affects blood pressure in urban adults. And then it will be clarify the magnitude of salt impact across various and demographics groups, especially in urban setting where processed food are common. Okay, this is right by Manti at all 2020. So the next one is the long-term sodium reduction effects. Focuses on sustainable changes in the blood pressure with long-term sodium reduction. Now, fill a gap in research by addressing the effectiveness of sodium reduction in real-world diverse the populations. That was by Welton et al. 2018. So the barrier to sodium reduction is examine specific challenges to reducing sodium in urban populations, informing strategy for overcoming dietary barriers. So, and also the research contribution apply value policy implications of public health intervention. So the first one is informing public health policy. Second one is guiding public health inventions, and also the overcoming barrier to sodium reductions. So the informing public health policy supports evidence-based policy to reduce sodium consumptions, such as foods manufacturer lowering salt in processed food, or public health campaign promoting awareness. This was for Puska et al. 2020. Could lead the stronger regulation on salt content and influence national health guidelines. So the second ones, guiding public health interventions, is a finding could help tailored intervention in urban setting where sodium intake is high due to process the food consumptions. Okay, so then it also could enhance education campaigns, school program, and media outreach on the danger of excessive salt consumption. Okay, so overcoming barrier to the sodium reduction is like identify socio-economy, culture and environments, barrier to the reduction of the salt intake. Offer practical strategy to help community reduce like sodium without sacrifice taste or convenience. So the final one of our presentation is this is our Gantt chart. when the first month we will do the literature review, first month and the second month. So the second month we will do the designation of the research tools. Next month also, after the third month, we do for the data collection for the month 3, month 4, and then we go for the data analysis, writing report, and lastly will be submissions, our proposal, research proposal. So okay, that is our last presentation from our group. So once again, thank you to our lecturer, and then also to my team, my group, was successfully to finish this research proposal. Thank you, Mr. Ganesan and Mr. Firdaus. Thank you.